In the late 1940s, Russians were notorious for doing some of the worst experiments imaginable on their prisoners. People even started to circulate rumors of stuff they would do to any captives that they had. The Russian sleep experiment is one of those rumored experiments. Although it's more of an urban legend than a real incident, we can't really know for sure if something like this wasn't done by them. The story goes something like this. During World War II, Russian researchers used an experimental gas-based stimulant to keep 5 people awake for 15 days. The test participants were political prisoners who were labeled enemies of the state. They were kept in a confined environment to carefully regulate their oxygen consumption so that the gas, which was deadly in high amounts, would not kill them. To monitor them, they only had microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole-sized windows. The room was well stocked with books, cots, running water, a toilet, and enough dry food to sustain all 5 for more than a month. For the first 5 days, everything was good. The subjects had been guaranteed, falsely, that they would be released if they could stay up for 30 days. It was observed that the individuals continued to discuss horrific experiences from their past, and the overall tone of their talks became gloomier after just 4 days. After 5 days, they began to exhibit significant paranoia. They stopped speaking to one another and began whispering into the microphones alternatively. Surprisingly, they all seemed to believe they might gain the researchers' trust by handing over their inmates. The researchers assumed this was due to the gas's influence. After 9 days, one began to scream. He ran around the room screeching for 3 hours straight, until his vocal cords were completely shredded. The other hostages had no reaction to it. Then another began to scream while the other 2 non-screaming hostages ripped the books apart, soiled page after page with their own feces, and quietly plastered them over the glass portholes. The screams abruptly stopped. The whispering on the microphones did as well. The researchers examined the microphones regularly to make sure they were operating, since the captives were completely silent. At this point, the noted amount of oxygen consumed was equivalent to what 5 people would consume during very intense exercise. On the 14th day, the researchers used the intercom inside the room, expecting to receive a reaction from the prisoners. They declared, "We're opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step back, lie flat on the floor, or you'll be shot. Compliance will earn one of you an immediate release." But they were shocked to hear a single remark in a calm voice. "We no longer want to be freed." It was ultimately decided that the chamber would be opened at midnight on day 15. As soon as the room was emptied of the stimulating gas, 3 voices began pleading, as though begging for the lives of loved ones, for the gas to be turned back on. Soldiers were sent in to grab the test participants when the chamber was unlocked. When the soldiers witnessed what was inside, they began to scream even louder than the captives. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, but nobody could term their condition as life. The food supplies had not been touched since day 5. Pieces of flesh from the dead test subject's thighs and chest had been jammed into the drain, clogging it, causing 4 inches of water and blood to collect on the ground. All 4 remaining survivors had significant amounts of muscle and skin ripped from their bodies. Further examination of the exposed bones and flesh and the positions of the injuries indicated that the wounds were self-inflicted. All 4 test subjects' abdominal organs had also been ripped out. The skin and most of the muscles linked to the ribs had been torn off, exposing the lungs, leaving just the heart and lungs within the body. All of the blood vessels and organs were still intact, but had been spread out on the floor. The digestive tract of all 4 could be seen digesting the flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the last course of days. The majority of the troops refused to go back into the chamber to remove the test participants. The captives, on the other hand, continued to beg to be left in the room and demanded for the gas to be switched back on so they would not fall asleep. The test participants fought hard while they were being dragged from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died when his throat was torn out. During the struggle, one of the 4 individuals' spleen got ruptured and began bleeding. Sedating him proved impossible. He was able to withstand the effects of more than 10 times the normal human dose of morphine, and even shattered one doctor's ribs and arm while in this state. He eventually bled out to the point where his vascular system held more air than blood and his heart began to stop. Still, he screamed for 3 minutes after his heart stopped completely and attempted to attack anybody in his sight while repeatedly screaming the word "more" until he eventually became motionless. The 3 surviving test subjects were physically restrained and brought to a medical institute, where the 2 with functioning vocal cords demanded to be kept awake at all times. The most seriously injured of the 3 was transferred to the facility's sole surgical operating room. He was completely immune to the sedative they had given him, just like the previous subject. When the anesthetic gas was brought out to put him under, he struggled hard against his bindings. He even tore most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap, despite the fact that the weight of a 200-pound soldier was also restraining that wrist. It required a little more anesthesia than usual to put him to sleep, and his heart stopped the moment his eyes shut closed. According to autopsy reports, he had fractured multiple bones while attempting to flee using the force of his muscles. The remaining 2 test subjects were given surgery without anesthetic, at their own request. They had to be injected with a paralytic, however, because the surgeon found it hard to conduct a procedure while the patients were laughing non-stop. When the patients were paralyzed, they could only follow the researchers with their eyes. The paralytic wore off quickly, and they were soon attempting to break free from their shackles. The researchers asked why they had hurt themselves and torn out their own intestines, and there was just one response: "I must stay awake." Their bindings were tightened and they were returned to the chamber while the people decided what to do with them. The leading officer, an ex-KGB agent, wanted to test what would happen if they were given the gas again. The researchers objected vigorously, but they were rejected. The subjects were attached to an EEG monitor and had their shackles padded for long-term confinement in preparation of being enclosed in the chamber again. To everyone's amazement, they ceased resisting as soon as it was revealed that they would be put back on the gas. The subject who could talk was humming loudly and incessantly, while the mute subject was straining his legs against the leather restraints in order to maintain focus. The researchers were tracking their brainwaves. They were mostly normal, although they occasionally flatlined for no apparent reason. It appeared as if they were experiencing brain death and then resuming normalcy. One nurse noticed the mute subject's eyes close at the same instant his head touched the pillow. His brainwaves went into deep slumber right away, and then flatlined for the last time as his heart stopped. The final test subject screamed to be locked in and left alone. His brainwaves were flatlining like the others. The commander issued the order to shut the chamber with the subject and 3 of the researchers inside, and at that moment one of the researchers took out his gun and shot the commander between the eyes. As the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room, he aimed his revolver at the last test subject. "I'm not going to be locked in here with those creatures. No way, not with you." He yelled at the man who was strapped to the table. "Who are you? I have to know." The subject just smiled and said, "Have you forgotten so easily? We are you. We are the madness that lurks within all of you, craving to be free every instant in the deepest, darkest, animalistic corner of your mind. Every night we are what you hide from in your beds. When you go to the midnight haven where we cannot go, you suppress us into silence and paralysis." The researcher stepped away, then aimed and shot towards the subject's heart. The subject choked and faintly said, "So nearly free," as he took his last breaths. From all of us here at How Strange, thanks for watching and listening to this retelling of the crazy Russian sleep experiment. And as always, thanks for watching.